Welcome back, friends, followers, and flyers. So, I wanted to do a little video addressing not 4-stroke versus 2-stroke, because I know the difference. 2-stroke, you rebuild them, they're cheap to rebuild. You maybe do it a little bit more often, but after having trouble with my 4-stroke, then I kind of wonder. So, the parts for this engine cost me $1,780 Canadian. I was told I couldn't be shipped just a piston, rings, and wrist pin and gaskets, yada yada. So I had to get a rebuild kit. So that included a rod, the main bearings, I think, like the rod bearing, all the valves, seats, guides, springs. And that was all fine. I put all of the valve stuff in the head. But 90 hours on this engine, and I had a catastrophic failure. What I want to address is, I spent the extra money to buy a 4-stroke fuel-injected engine, and up until now, I absolutely love this engine. I've talked to some guys in different places that have had trouble with it, kind of bogging around 6,500 RPM. We've experienced that very minorly. So that said, I spent the extra money and I bought this 4-stroke engine with the idea that this thing would be really, really good. And it has been. It's been a great engine. I've only had one thing that I could fault on the Swiss Auto 250, and I think Blackhawk has the new version of it, and I think they call it the Aero 1000 or something, is the valve cover. Not a big deal either. You just have to use a sealant on it. The valve cover is flawed. It's not very good, but you can make it work. But that's been my only complaint with this engine until it blew up. So, why did my engine blow up? Well, at the start, from talking to lots of different guys who've had lots of different problems, from valve springs breaking and lots of cracked pistons, I started to worry that, oh, this thing is, maybe not the best machine that I thought it was. So I did a bunch of research. When we took my engine apart, it was cracked. The piston was cracked, as you guys saw, right across the wrist pin. So when I looked at that, I was like, okay, that could be a wear thing and it's just weak. But then the more I researched, I found out that I'm not really so sure that's the case. So we talked to Fresh Breeze in Germany, and with 300 machines sold in that area, 2 piston failures. Anyway, so that doesn't seem like the problem that what we've been hearing from different people, that everyone's having all these problems with these pistons breaking and valve springs breaking. And Troy and I, through talking to different people, have come up with our own conclusion that I think I had pre-ignition or detonation on the engine. And so up until my engine failure, I had been running like 91 octane pump gas with VP racing fuel. And I know different guys have asked me what it is, so that's why I'm doing this video partially too. So VP racing fuels can be bought at most outdoor motorsport stores, I believe. I'm not sure about in the States, but I believe in the States as well. The stuff we use is VP Racing Fuels T4 Power Sport Fuel. 100 octane R plus M2, whatever that means, fuel for modern four-stroke engines. You can run this stuff and should probably run it straight. I had been mixing mine with 91, premium 91 gas with about a third. So in a 5-gallon pail, I had put about a third of it would be VP. So this is 100 octane, and I was at 91. You add a third to it, you're probably still only up to 96. And these engines, so I'll just show you that first, because I know people are VP, T4, racing fuel, 100 octane. The Swiss Auto engine, made by Helvenka, is supposed to run a minimum of 96 octane. Now, if you don't know, the lower the octane, the faster it explodes. And in my mind, through the whole time that I've run this paramotor, 90 hours, I've run about a third of this fuel, or a little bit more, per 5-gallon pail. So my octane was probably at the minimum, 96, I would guess. Never had a problem. The flight where I blew up my engine was the very first day that I cheaped out. I had 91 octane fuel in my jerry can, and I don't think it was a quarter of the VP racing fuel. So I would guess my octane would have been 92, 94, probably in that range. Maybe less even, probably less, because I really cheaped out. This stuff's not all that cheap. I think it's $150 for one of these. $134.99 Canadian. So you can imagine you'll spend a little bit extra, but I spent $1,800 plus $400 labor to rebuild my engines, so that's starting to look not all that expensive. So what happens with detonation? So when your piston comes up, and if you're using a lower octane and it fires sooner, before that piston gets right at the top dead center, if it fires when it's still coming up, boom, that thing gets hammered on. It's coming up and boom. It needs to fire as it's peaked at the top and then shoot the piston back down. So I think I detonated my engine. We took a light and put it down inside Troy's engine, and he always runs at least a third VP in his, and he has the same hours as I do on his. We looked down inside of his, and his piston's black on top, and it's not washed off. There's no carbon blown off. It's just smooth and black. He's always run more than I have as far as octane goes. I'm just cheap, and yeah, I cheap out. My piston, now it may have been because the piston broke that the carbon was all blown off, but I don't think so. I think the carbon was blown off in the detonation event because the carbon was blown off in a circle in the center, and it wasn't the full length of the crack where the carbon was missing. So I think the crack I think what happened was when it detonated, that piston, it just, at the weak point where the pin goes through, the wrist pin goes through, I think the piston just was like, ugh, and it just failed. So anyone out there that is running a Swiss Auto or an Aero 1000, I hope that the problem with these pistons is that we're not using high enough octane. I 100% believe that it is now, and I'm feeling fairly confident if we put this engine together properly and didn't miss anything, that this thing will run way more than 90 hours. Now, one thing about this engine, it was designed as a race engine. Race engines need racing fuel, or at least high octane fuel. It's just the way it is with these engines. These engines were developed for kart racing. In kart racing world, they run them at 12,000 RPM from what I understand, These things max out around 8,000 RPM on the buggies, but they're really pushing hard. So they're working really hard. So if you have detonation, it's obviously not going to be a good thing. Black Hawk, from what I understand, tells their guys just to run regular pump gas and you won't have a problem. Well, I think Black Hawk has had that engine out now for 2 or 3 years maybe. So it'll be interesting to see, unless they've changed something on the Aero 1000, but it's essentially the same engine, I'm pretty darn sure, from what I understand. It'll be interesting to see if these guys start to have piston failures, and I'd be happy to hear from anyone if you have had piston failures. I don't know if detonation can cause valve springs to break. I can't imagine why it would, but I don't know that for sure either. But I doubt it. I doubt that that would cause it. Yeah, so anyone out there flying the Swiss Auto 250, I would up my octane personally from what I've seen looking at Troy's engine compared to mine. Now, who knows? Maybe in a week from now, Troy's engine blows up too. But I kind of doubt it. So that's what I think happened, guys. I think I blew my own engine up, and it was a costly thing to do. $2,200 was a big hit to get back in the air again. So, yeah, it's definitely got me thinking, but I'm pretty sure that using the VP, and my advice is not to use avgas because it's not an airplane. It's flying me, but it's not an airplane. It's not an airplane engine. Avgas is designed for aircraft engines, from what I understand. So VP racing fuel, and hope for the best. And I hope anyone out there that's running a Swiss Auto 250, hope all the best for you, because it's not cheap to fix them. Anyhow, oh, and one other thing. In the kart world, on these engines, running them at 12,000 RPM, the piston replace time is 40 hours. I haven't heard of a replace time for using them on a paramotor. I haven't seen that data anywhere posted. Rebuild time, full rebuild time on these engines is 500 hours. And I've heard of lots of guys out there with over 400 hours on theirs and never had a broken piston. I haven't asked those particular people whether or not they were using 100 octane or 98 or at least above 96. So that would be interesting to know. So anyways, that's just the update, guys. And I don't know if you could hear the building shaking, but it is windy as hell out there. Yesterday was windy as hell, and tomorrow's supposed to be windy, but it's supposed to be completely sunny, so I'm crossing my fingers that we get the old bad girl back in the air again and go and do some flying and get back to some more fun videos instead of this boring blowing shit up videos. So yeah, I don't know if that helped anyone out. I hope it did, and I'd like to hear any responses from anyone that may know better than me, or yeah, just have added information that we could put out there. So for sure, comment on my video and on this topic. I'd love to hear from you guys. So, all right, until next time, and hopefully next time we're flying instead of talking bullshit rebuilds. Okay. All right, that Canadian dude, over and out, and I'll see you guys in the next video.